All right, so are you ready to break down some NBA action with me from January 8th, 2025? We're talking upsets, clutch plays, and maybe even some early hints at who to watch out for in the playoffs.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, cool. We've got a great episode of NBA Game Day Recap to go over together, and let me tell you, there's some real surprises in store.
Yeah, what's interesting is we're not just looking at wins and losses. We're looking at what these games tell us about, the evolving strategies and power dynamics in the league.
For sure, I'm with you. So the Game Day Recap hosts called Last Night in the NBA Electric, and they weren't kidding. Big wins, unexpected losses, and some real nail-biters that came down to the wire. I'm dying to get your take on some of these matchups. Where should we start?
Well, let's jump right into the Denver Nuggets versus the Boston Celtics game.
Okay.
Celtics took this one 118 to 106.
Wow.
On the surface, it might look like a standard win for a top team,
Right.
but there's more to it than that.
Yeah. I was surprised by how dominant the Celtics were, especially their bench. The Game Day Recap folks pointed out that the Celtics bench actually outscored the Nuggets bench by a significant margin. How much do you think that depth contributed to their win? And could it be a factor in a potential playoff series against a team like Denver?
Oh, yeah, that bench performance was huge. It shows that the Celtics aren't just reliant on Tatum and Brown
Right.
to carry the load. You know what I mean? They've got a whole roster of guys who can step up and contribute. And in a 7-game playoff series,
Oh, yeah.
that kind of depth can be a game changer. It allows them to maintain that high level of intensity on both ends of the floor, even when their starters need a breather.
So it's not just about star power. It's about having a well-rounded team.
Exactly.
And speaking of star power, the Nuggets, of course, have Nikola Jokic, who's an absolute monster on the court. But Game Day Recap pointed out that, their reliance on him can be a weakness against a team with elite defense like the Celtics. You break down why that is?
Well, yeah, I mean, Jokic is an incredible talent. He can score, pass, rebound. He can control the tempo of the game.
He does it all.
But when a team becomes too predictable
Right.
and reliant on one player, even a player as skilled as Jokic, it makes them easier to defend. I mean, the Celtics were clearly prepared for Jokic. They double-teamed him, forced him to give up the ball, made it tough for him to get into a rhythm. Against a team with that level of defensive sophistication, the Nuggets are going to need to find more ways to generate offense if they want to compete.
A balanced attack is crucial. That seems to be a theme emerging here.
Yeah.
Let's move on to a game that had everyone talking, the Golden State Warriors versus the Miami Heat.
Okay.
The Heat pulled off a bit of an upset, winning 114 to 98. The Warriors looked surprisingly shaky, especially on offense. What was your biggest takeaway from this matchup?
Well, the Heat's defensive game plan was absolutely masterful. They completely shut down the Warriors', signature high-octane offense. What impressed me most was how they specifically targeted Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. I mean, they used a combination of tight man-to-man coverage, aggressive traps, and well-timed double teams to disrupt their flow and force them into tough shots.
Wow, so they didn't just play good defense. They had a specific strategy designed to neutralize the Warriors' biggest threats.
Exactly.
That's impressive. Game Day Recap highlighted the Heat's physicality and teamwork as keys to their win. They even suggested that it was a reflection of their coaching and team culture. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, yeah. I mean, the Heat have a reputation for being one of the most disciplined and well-coached teams in the league. They've got a culture of hard work, accountability, and a defense-first mentality.
Right.
And their win against the Warriors was a perfect example of this philosophy in action. They were relentless on defense. They hustled for every loose ball they played with a level of intensity and focus that the Warriors just couldn't match.
It almost felt like the Heat wanted it more, like they were playing with something to prove. On the flip side, the Warriors are facing some challenges. They've got an aging roster and a lack of depth on the bench. How much of a factor do you think those issues played in their loss last night?
Well, aging is an inevitable part of the game, and even the greatest players eventually slow down. The Warriors' core is getting older, and that can have an impact on their stamina and, their ability to keep up with younger, faster teams. The lack of bench depth further exacerbates this problem. If their star players aren't performing at their peak, the Warriors become vulnerable.
Right. It makes you wonder if they need to make some roster moves to inject some fresh talent and energy into the team. Okay, before we move on to the next game, I have a question for you, dear listener. Think about the Warriors for a second. What do you think they need to do to remain competitive in a league that's getting younger and faster?
That's a great question. Now let's shift gears to a game that was an absolute thriller. The Utah Jazz versus the Atlanta Hawks. This one went right down to the wire with the Hawks pulling off a 124-121 victory thanks to a last-second three-pointer by Trae Young. Talk about a heart-stopping moment.
I was on the edge of my seat. That Trae Young shot was something else. He's really making a name for himself as a clutch player. But let's not forget about the Jazz. Lauri Markkanen had a fantastic game for them, but they still couldn't get the win. Game day recap mentioned a recurring problem for the Jazz, their defense in crunch time. Those final minutes of a close game where every possession matters.
Yeah, that's a keen observation. The Jazz have a talented roster, but their ability to maintain defensive intensity in those crucial moments seems to be a weakness. They tend to make mental errors, miss assignments, and allow easy baskets when the pressure is on. This could be a coaching issue where they need to tighten up their defensive schemes in late-game situations, or it could be a matter of personnel where they need players who are more defensively minded and can handle the pressure of those high-stakes moments.
It's interesting because they clearly have the offensive firepower to compete with anyone, but if they can't figure out how to lock down defensively in crunch time, they're going to have a tough time closing out close games, especially in the playoffs. So we've got 3 fascinating games under our belts. Let's keep this momentum going and take a look at some other notable matchups from last night, shall we?
Absolutely. There's still plenty to unpack. Let's dive in. It's fascinating to see how these early season games can be so revealing. We're not even at the All-Star break yet, but we're already starting to see which teams have the potential to be real contenders.
Absolutely. And it's not just about looking at the standings, right? It's about analyzing how teams are winning, how they're adapting, and how they're responding to adversity. That's where you really start to separate the contenders from the pretenders.
Couldn't agree more. We talked about the Celtics' balanced attack and the Heat's stifling defense.
Right.
But there's another layer to their success that we need to explore. Coaching.
Okay. I'm all ears. Let's talk coaching. What are you seeing?
Well, with the Celtics, Ime Udoka deserves a lot of credit. He's created a system that maximizes the talents of each player. They play with a sense of shared purpose. And you can see the trust they have in each other, especially in those high-pressure moments. It's not just about running plays. It's about creating a culture of accountability and shared responsibility.
That makes sense. A strong coach can really elevate a team's performance, even if they don't have the most talented roster on paper.
Exactly. And speaking of strong coaching, we have to talk about Erik Spoelstra and the Miami Heat. Their win against the Warriors was a clinic on defensive strategy.
I was blown away by how they shut down Curry and Thompson. It was like they had a playbook specifically designed to neutralize them. Did Spoelstra pull something out of his bag of tricks?
Well, Spoelstra is a master of defensive adjustments. What impressed me most was the use of a box-and-one defense. Yeah, a strategy you don't see very often in the NBA. They basically had one defender glued to Steph Curry wherever he went on the court, while the other 4 defenders formed a box around the key to prevent easy drives and cuts. It's a risky strategy, but it worked brilliantly against the Warriors.
So they threw a curveball at the Warriors, and it paid off big time. I'm starting to see why the Heat always seem to be in the mix, even when they're not considered the favorites. It's that combination of coaching defensive intensity and just a sheer refusal to back down from a challenge.
Exactly. The Heat have a culture of resilience. They don't crumble when they face adversity. They embrace the grind. They make you earn every basket, and that can be incredibly demoralizing for their opponents.
So we got the Celtics with their balance and strong coaching, and the Heat with their defensive prowess and never-give-up attitude. What other trends are you seeing emerge from these early season games that might be worth paying attention to?
One thing that's becoming increasingly clear is the importance of depth. Teams that can rely on their bench to provide quality minutes are going to have a significant advantage as the season wears on and fatigue sets in.
Yeah, you can't just rely on your starting 5 to carry the load all season long, especially in a league as competitive as the NBA.
Right. Look at the Warriors, for example. They're struggling partly because their bench isn't as strong as it used to be. A deep bench allows you to give your starters some much-needed rest without sacrificing too much in terms of talent and energy. It also provides a spark when the starters are having an off night.
Depth is like that secret weapon that can make all the difference in a long playoff run. What else? Any other insights you want to share?
Well, this might seem obvious, but it's worth reiterating. The ability to adapt is crucial. The NBA season is a marathon, not a sprint. Teams are constantly evolving, scouting each other, making adjustments. The teams that can learn from their mistakes, tweak their strategies, and make the necessary in-season improvements are the ones that are going to be most successful.
It's like a game of chess, right? You have to be able to anticipate your opponent's moves, counter their strategies, and be willing to change your game plan on the fly.
Precisely. And speaking of chess, let's take a look at a team that seems to be struggling to adapt. The Los Angeles Lakers. They have LeBron James, arguably the greatest player of all time,
Right.
but they're still having trouble finding consistency.
Yeah, I was going to say, even with LeBron, they haven't quite figured it out yet. What do you think is holding them back? Is it just a matter of time, or are there deeper issues at play?
Well, it's a combination of factors, I think. Age is certainly a factor. Their roster is one of the oldest in the league, but I think it goes beyond that. They haven't quite figured out how to build a cohesive unit around LeBron. They're still trying to establish roles and build chemistry.
It almost feels like they're too reliant on LeBron to be LeBron and single-handedly carry them to victory. But as amazing as he is, he can't do it all alone.
You're right. And as great as LeBron is, even he is showing signs of slowing down. He's still capable of putting up big numbers, but he can't dominate games like he used to. The Lakers need to find other ways to generate offense and create opportunities for their role players.
So it sounds like they need to find that balance between leveraging LeBron's strengths and empowering the rest of the team to contribute.
Yeah.
And it's not just about offense. They need to improve defensively as well. They've been giving up way too many points, especially in the paint.
Absolutely. They need to be more disciplined on defense, communicate better, and make it tougher for opponents to score inside. It's not just about individual effort. It's about playing together as a unit, trusting each other, and being willing to sacrifice for the good of the team.
It's a reminder that even with a superstar like LeBron James, it takes more than just individual talent to win in the NBA. You need teamwork, coaching, adaptability, and a whole lot of grit.
You've summed it up perfectly. The beauty of the NBA is that it's not just about who has the best players on paper. It's about who can put all the pieces together and execute a winning strategy.
Which brings us to a crucial element that often gets overlooked in sports analysis: the mental game. We've talked about strategy, tactics, and physical skills, but what about the psychological factors that can make or break a team?
That's a great point. The mental game is often the difference between crumbling under pressure and rising to the occasion. It's about having that unwavering belief in yourself and your teammates, even when things aren't going your way.
So in part 3, we're going to dive into the psychology of winning, exploring how mental toughness, resilience, and leadership play a vital role in shaping the NBA landscape. Stay tuned.
Right.
Welcome back to our deep dive, into the NBA. We've analyzed all the X's and O's, the strategies, the matchups.
Right.
But now I think it's time to shift our focus to a crucial element that I think often gets overlooked in sports analysis: the mental game.
Yeah, it's fascinating, how much emphasis we put on, physical skills and coaching. But the mental aspect of the game is just as important. It's the difference between folding under pressure and rising to the occasion.
Exactly. Think about that game-winning shot by Trae Young for the Atlanta Hawks. He was ice cold under pressure, didn't hesitate, didn't overthink it, just trusted his instincts and delivered when it mattered most.
Yeah, that's what separates the good players from the great ones you know. They have that unwavering belief in themselves, that clutch gene that allows them to block out the noise and perform at their best when the stakes are highest. And Young seems to be developing that killer instinct. He's not afraid of the moment.
So mental toughness, how can we spot that in players? What makes it such a crucial ingredient for success in the NBA?
Well, mental toughness is a combination of factors. It's about having confidence in your abilities even when you're facing adversity. It's about staying composed under pressure, not letting mistakes or bad calls rattle you. And it's about having that unshakable belief that you can overcome any obstacle.
You think it's something that could be taught?
It's not something you can teach. It's either something you have or you don't.
Interesting. And it's not just about individual players, is it? Teams can have a collective mental toughness too, right?
Absolutely. Think about the Miami Heat. They've got that us against the world mentality. They don't back down from challenges. They embrace the grind. That resilience is woven into the fabric of their team culture.
It's almost like they feed off the pressure, like they get stronger when the going gets tough. So mental toughness is like an extra gear, an intangible edge that can help teams win close games and weather the inevitable storms of the NBA season. What about leadership? How does that play into this mental aspect of the game?
Well, leadership is essential for creating a winning culture.
Right.
Great leaders inspire their teammates. They set the tone. They lead by example. They hold themselves and their teammates accountable.
I mean, Luka Doncic comes to mind. He's not just a phenomenal player. He's also a leader. He makes everyone around him better.
Yeah, Doncic is a natural leader. He has that rare combination of talent, charisma, and a fierce determination to win. Players gravitate towards him.
They want to play for him.
Exactly. He elevates their game just by being on the court.
It's interesting to see how different players embody leadership. Some guys are vocal leading with their words and their energy. Others lead by example through their actions and their unwavering dedication.
And the best teams often have a mix of leadership styles. You've got veterans who provide guidance and young guys who are eager to learn and make their mark. When those dynamics work, it creates a powerful synergy.
As we're wrapping up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what's the main takeaway you want to leave our listeners with?
I want them to remember that basketball is more than just a physical game. It's a mental battle as much as it is a physical one. The teams that can master the mental side of the game, the resilience, the leadership, the unwavering belief, those are the teams that will ultimately achieve greatness.
It's been awesome exploring the intricacies of the NBA with you, from the strategic moves on the court to the mental fortitude that separates the contenders from the pretenders. And for you, dear listener, keep watching, keep analyzing, keep diving deep into the game. There's always something new to discover, something to learn, and something to be inspired by. Until next time, keep that love for the game alive.